Hi everyone. We'll start in a couple of minutes, but if you have any technical issues, please reach out, and otherwise see you in a few minutes. Good morning, everyone. For some of you, good afternoon for the other ones, and thank you all for joining this webinar, Why Data Science is Your Best Ally to Manage the COVID-19 Crisis. I'm Noemi, and I'll be the moderator for today. Before we get started, I'd like to share some housekeeping reminders. As you've noticed, everyone is on mute to facilitate the presentation. However, you are welcome to ask questions, and to do so, you can use the dedicated questions tab. We'll have some time to address the questions at the end of the session, but feel free to send them to me as the webinar rises. Please note that this session is recorded. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce both of our speakers, namely Matt Andrew, Managing Director of Ekimetrics London, and Adam Rodgers, Managing Director of Ekimetrics America. And if you don't know Ekimetrics, may I shortly introduce you our company. Ekimetrics is a global consultancy leading in data science with more than 280 data scientists. And we help companies in the detection and implementation of their data-driven strategies, especially on issues of marketing performance, I mean MMO, pricing, brand impact measurement, and so on, but also customer-centric approaches, operational excellence, and the creation of new products and services. Matt, Adam, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Noemi, and thanks everyone for joining us today. If any of you came from Adam's LinkedIn post promising some wit, I can't be held responsible for that. That's completely down to Adam. But we'll do our best to keep you entertained for the next half an hour and tell you something interesting and help kind of guide you through what could be up to the next 18 months to 2 years in terms of post-COVID impact on the economy. So to start, some things that everyone knows, we've had lots of lots of kind of downturns in the economy over history. It's not new to have a crisis, and there've been many over time. And when we look at our markets, the United States and the United Kingdom, generally we're quite kind of aligned in terms of when we have our dips in the market. What's different about COVID-19 is that it's really, one of the first global crises is going to massively impact, or has the potential to massively impact, consumer behavior in a way that many before haven't done, where they've been purely financial. But also what's very different is that we have access to much more data, and we're able to leverage that in ways that help us really think about the right way to approach the market, about the indicators to say how the markets are doing through this, and to really steer how and when you can think about applying more spend in the market as well. One of the things we want to talk about is what the role of models are during this period, and how and if the models are helping at all. Because when you see a very broad spread of, in this case, kind of forecasts for cumulative deaths from COVID-19, you have an upper bound of kind of 150,000, a lower bound of 60,000. It doesn't seem that it can be that useful. And what does accuracy even mean in that case when the spread of models you have is so large? But actually, is the role of a model to be right? Is it to support decisions? And I guess when we think about COVID-19 and we think about modeling the impact and the different scenarios that are coming from that, actually the goal of a good model in this case is to be wrong. It's to allow policies to be implemented that change the outcome of the model and actually flatten the curve and make sure that not as many people are impacted by COVID-19 as might be otherwise. And really what's fundamental is ensuring that the models give us a clear range of scenarios, and then link to the drivers of upper or lower bounds of outcomes, and be able to track which one is looking more likely. And we're going to talk a bit more about that through the rest of this webinar as well.
Right. So hello, everyone. Again, my name is Adam, and I apologize if you hear some of my coworkers in the background, my kids and dogs and other things. But if you're like me, right, what Matt is talking about, we're hearing modeling, mostly from a societal perspective, a healthcare perspective, but it's really, really difficult, right? So the question is, we have so many inputs that are affecting just, let's say, what the right prediction is going to be in terms of the curve of the recovery, right? Health-wise, right? I mean, if you're like me, you're reading a million different analyses, New York Times, Financial Times, everybody has a different model, has a different visualization, but it's really difficult to pin down what the result is going to be. 538 did a good analysis that basically said, we have so many driver variables into what that final case model is going to be, and all of those have so much variability. If you take it to the business context, which is where we sit, we just want to understand what's going to be the curve of that recovery in itself. And so all those variables drive just to one unknown, which is only one factor in understanding the economic recovery, and then ultimately understanding how to play and how to act. So is it even useful to go through this exercise? I think we still think it is, right? So if you think about the number of scenarios that really you can play through, you have to change your mindset of saying there's one plan. I brought in a little bit of baseball because I miss baseball, and if you're in the U.S., you might miss it too. But you can have a plan to go to market, a plan on a rock solid plan to beat your competition. But given the uncertainty that we're facing, you need to be able to actually prepare for different situations, prepare for playing for different teams, prepare for a different environment and different competitors. And so what modeling can do then is help you understand what those, by simulating what those scenarios could be, and start to give you the chance to make a variety of decisions. It's important to be agile and reactive so that you can narrow the decisions you're going to make, right? If you know there are thousands of simulations and you can start to break them down and rule some out, you're able to narrow down what your reactivity could be in terms of your marketing, in terms of your pricing, in terms of your distribution. You're able to narrow down what are the best decisions in each of those scenarios. And that's what we try to do through our modeling and through predictive analytics. We try to help you narrow the cases so that you know, in this case, which door to go through once you're presented with 5 doors instead of 10,000 doors.
And what that means is when you've narrowed that field of play, you can really be proactive and you have some clarity in your decision making that is absent when you have a whole range of scenarios that are still on the table and you don't know which one to go down. So for every leader across every business, the question is how to behave, where to act and react to the market and your competition, how to do it, how far, which risks, which results are you willing to take. And really data science is this unmissable tool that can guide you through this. It helps you think creatively, it helps you build up your options. And what we're going to talk about for the rest of this session is during the crisis, during the recovery phase, when we're back to whatever sort of new normal faces us, and when everyone is happy to get back on a train again and travel into London or New York or wherever you're based. What's important is to narrow the field of play, as we've talked about already, but we'll go a bit deeper. Looking at incremental local gains, so that you're not just thinking of the big aggregate picture, but you're taking the opportunities earlier than other people by really knowing what's happening in a local region. Connecting your actions to the funnel is important anytime, but I'll explain why during a crisis this can be even more important and help you move away from the knee-jerk, seemingly easy kind of actions to take and think more about true incremental and how that can benefit you. And then follow your customers as they adapt and as their behaviors change, how you can make sure that the customer is the center of your marketing strategy and all the business decisions that you're taking. So when we talk about narrowing the field of play, I'm going to focus a bit more on market sales forecasts here and really bring it to life a bit with a case study from a cosmetics brand that we work with. The idea is it's critical to understand the range of scenarios that could occur, the drivers of these, the indicators that can then help you narrow down those most likely outcomes and be able to take confident decisions from this. But the role of a scenario and the way you use simulations and scenario planning in the business should change as we go through the crisis, and they don't have the same role to play at every stage. So when we're in the midst of the crisis, when it's really just about business resilience, it's really making sure you're able to weather the worst case scenario, and that even where we're in markets that are either slowly reopening or about to reopen, it's really important not to be overly optimistic, really to make sure that you're resilient to a second wave, if that's something that comes about, to consumers deciding they're not going to go back out into the market, even if restrictions are lifted, because they still have fear, that they still see the stats in terms of deaths and infections and things like that. So even though the market says it's moving in one direction, you need to make sure you've got the resilience for that worst case scenario plan. When it's looking at being stronger tomorrow, getting ready for that recovery phase, it's mapping out the routes ahead. You need a clear set of those potential routes and knowing what you would invest in each scenario and how you kind of sell that into the business. And then being ahead of the new normal, making sure your business is prepared and you're ready to accelerate into that new normal. You need to narrow down that potential route and really stick to that main investment, and then use those day-to-day, week-to-week indicators to tailor your tactical execution as the day-to-day metrics change. And the way that we can use scenarios and forecasts as part of this, and one of the benefits of really operating globally is that we can be powered by knowledge of outcomes in early markets. So we can take that knowledge from working with our clients in markets that have been hit early, but are already on the way to recovery. We've seen the dynamics, we've begun to understand the drivers of these as well. So when we see the difference in terms of brick and mortar impact and e-commerce impact for a cosmetics brand in China during crisis, through the recovery phase, and then back to normal, what it means for their growth versus the trajectory they were on before. We understand the drivers of those changes over time, and we can apply that to what it looks like in other markets where those different kind of levers of the economic effect are different. So where it's a longer lockdown period, where there are higher death rates, where there's increased economic impact from what's happening, and really give us a range of scenarios in place for those different markets. So even though this brand has a very strong growth in China still, even with the COVID disruption, it translates to growth, to actually quite strong growth, in kind of forecasting 30+% growth in the Chinese market for this year, even post-COVID. But in the UK and the US, we're looking at a much narrower range of kind of 3 to 8% and 1 to 4% in the UK and US markets. And it's being able to translate that knowledge into this range of scenarios and have the indicators that can help us understand which side of that kind of scenario that you're looking at. And ultimately, it's not the final number that counts. It's about helping you make the right decision early and being able to map that to leading indicators so that you can take the right working forecast into all the different kind of investment plays you're looking at. So switching slightly to a hotel brand, if we're looking at the different scenarios that we've kind of been putting in place for the UK market, where clearly hotels have been really heavily impacted by everything that's happening around COVID-19, the picture isn't quite as rosy as it is for cosmetics. And even to be doing well, you're looking at a 32% decline in revenue for 2020 full year versus the year before. And then we can map that to cost of media across each of those different scenarios and really make it an investment play and a business case to take to the business and saying, look, we're seeing the leading indicators moving us towards this green scenario. We know that we're more likely to be on the route of 30% decline, but we know the cost of media is going to remain low for the year. And so actually our campaign performance is still going to be strong. We need to invest, we should invest, and let's make it happen. But if you were wanting to invest in the market, wanting to accelerate for growth, but you're looking at something that was actually 50% decline in the year, in that instance, it doesn't necessarily make as much sense to make those investments with the ROI that you're looking at. So really being able to have that range of scenarios, the range of kind of indicators that lead to which scenario is most likely, and the battle plan in place to know that once you've got that narrowed field of play and you know which kind of route you're most likely to go down, then you can really execute quickly and make sure that you're ahead of the market coming back.
So another way that we're helping our clients is to think about how to change the models and the optimization routines by matching to what we're seeing in the market. And what that means is we need to, brands, big companies, small companies, need to really sort of start to think that think about how the recovery is a local, it's full of local dynamics, okay? It's not so much, even in the US and the UK particularly, but you can think about this from a global perspective. Every area has its own curve. Every area is recovering faster. People are stuck in their houses with their families, with their neighbors, and everything else. And the dynamics are very, very different. We see this anecdotally, but we're starting to see this with the sales results, the Google search results, and all of these different pieces. If you're in a high density population, your purchasing behavior, your interaction online is different than if you're in a rural area, your mobility, these sorts of things. So everything we're observing can't be generalized as nationally as it has in the past. So you need to have the flexibility to actually take your modeling to that local level, right? So if you go and you think about what happens on the local level, there's more factors in play, and luckily there's more data that can help us understand how getting back to business is different than what it has been in the past. So what we're doing for a number of our clients is that we are not only breaking down the models, the predictive modeling, in this case, most of this is marketing mix modeling, but it can be applied to customer analytics and everything else. but you're combining those key demographic information pieces, your wealth, your age, and elements like that, with the recovery case studies of what's happening with COVID, with mobility data that's being provided by everyone from Google to the GPS systems, to changes in distribution, so the number of stores that are open, number of stores that are closed, competition, all of these different new data streams, which many of which are available, now have to be put into your model so that you can understand and model what's going to happen on a local level and start to identify which areas are going to recover at what speeds. Once you have that, you can also take what you know from history around media and marketing, right? And start to war game. If you go to the next slide, start to war game on what does your mix look like and what's the most sort of efficient or effective way to optimize in each region, right? So this is a simplistic example, but we're doing this on a DMA level or on a regional level for banking clients, retail clients, sort of CPD and beauty clients. If you know what different pieces are most effective in those areas based on, again, the demographics, based on purchase behavior, you have some sense of which tactics work better, and you can actually start to put in place a plan to use the right tactics in the right areas, especially at the right time. So what we've been doing is we've been optimizing and comparing a national strategy to a local strategy. Okay, in a nationalized strategy, this is an illustrative example, but as we think of what the recovery looks like, you start to spend, your marketing contribution starts to go up. Let's say this is sort of towards Q4 at the end of the year. Again, based on what your base is or your non-marketing factors, you may see some multiple based on how you market and the mix you have. But if you optimize more than just that mix, and you start to optimize the flighting, the geo, you actually can build your own sort of S-curve here, okay? Which makes a big difference. Number one, the area under the curve, which is the revenue or the sales you're gonna get, actually increases, even though you're taking the same budget and you're just piecing it out into different territories at different times. You're building this, like I said, more of an S-curve than the L or V curve in terms of recovery, which means that your cash flow increases. So you're seeing money faster into the organization, plus you're beating your competition and driving share. So as you think about modeling, even with the same models you may have, if you have some local granularity, you need to change the dimensions of how you're optimizing. And that can really help put those plans in place for wargaming success, and also being able to really take advantage of where things are good versus where things are bad, in a way that keeps the business humming, or at least as well as it can be.
So you have your simulations, you have your scenarios, you understand how to act local to win those emerging opportunities at a local level. Next, we want to kind of talk about how you can connect your actions to the funnel and why that's really important to drive true incrementality. And during crisis, it's important at any time to think about true incrementality, but it's even more critical during crisis when you need to ensure that every single investment is really bringing new business for you, and the role that different marketing actions can take across the funnel can vary greatly. So everyone knows the funnel, everyone knows it isn't a simple journey at an individual level, and that with technology and the internet and omnichannel experiences, the funnel is washy on an individual level, but broadly it allows us to understand brand desirability, what pushes consideration, and then what's the final switch to conversion. And if you take the right proxies, so desirability, we often use search volume for the brand. Consideration can be website traffic. Obviously, it's not relevant for every single type of business, but proxies are available that we can take in any market that we work in. And then you're modeling out those final sales conversions. It can really help you understand what those different marketing levers are doing at each stage of the funnel. And so using nested or multi-stage models, we separate those impacts across the funnel. So just an example from a pure player, e-com fashion retailer in Europe, splitting that impact of levers across the funnel and really helping them move beyond a heavy acquisition play where they're really reliant on MTA-like solutions to understand the performance of their business, but helping them understand what's driving longer term effects and effects that are higher up the funnel as well. And why that's important is that when we think about true incremental, and this is where it gets a bit more counterintuitive, is that high ROI doesn't always mean high incremental. And I'm going to talk about two effects here that are really important to consider, especially when it comes into where you're investing. So the first thing to understand is that piloting your business just with ROIs is going to leave you some missing opportunities or not seeing the growth you actually expect. It's important in a crisis because you need to make sure that the investments that you're making are really new business that is growing on top of what you could have expected to come, because every pound here, every dollar here is much more important than it is outside of a crisis when the business is going really well. So let's take the case on brand search on the left. What's important to think about brand search? It's always on. It responds to a customer demand, which is a search. And it's highly correlated to sales. In both MTA, so multi-touch attribution, and MMM or other econometrics approaches, this will always show as being high ROI. But if for those more technically minded, you can kind of explore further around the topic of self-selection bias, which is quite important to understand around attribution, especially. But self-selection bias around search can lead to some of these really high ROIs through analytics, but actually arguably low true incrementality. And if we go back to the IPA Effectiveness Week in October in London last year, that's where Simon Peel from Adidas, the global media director, shared his own experience with this in Brazil when Google search ads went down for a week. So there were no search ads running, and he really saw no impacts on traffic and conversion. And so they did a longer test and has subsequently kind of shifted more budget to upper funnel, and it's really helps them move beyond a pure kind of acquisition play and really feeling tied to the immediate metrics that you have in digital and understand true incremental through the whole funnel. The other side we're looking at is impacts from non-tracked media or media that's normally a more aggregate kind of measure. So the kind of classic example here is TV spots driving search responses. And again, in MTA, where TV is again more difficult to kind of bring into an MTA solution, and even econometrics, where the data is more aggregated, these kind of dependent effects between TV and search can get lost, and ultimately it's search that's picking up the benefit. So again, understanding the funnel, understanding the effect of the funnel through this, and understanding that true incremental is really important, can be a real way to make sure every pound, every dollar is going that much further for you. So how do you make it work? How do you actually make sure you're investing in the funnel, and what's it mean for during a crisis? So clearly, when resilience is the key factor, when you're in the midst of the crisis and it's all about survival, you need to secure your customers in the market. Focusing on the lower funnel with minimal spend is really important to secure those customers where they are. As you look to stronger tomorrow and as you look ahead, ensuring the investments you're making are really on top business will bring you stronger growth than playing in pure acquisition. So you want to be thinking about scaling investments, you're changing baseline. If you've seen a 30% drop in kind of your average weekly sales, then you should be scaling media down, because you're just not going to get the same return on investment in this period. And it means you won't have the kind of investment or the spend when the market starts to pick up. But you want to be building new customers through that top of the funnel activity. And then to get ahead of the new normal, it's really making sure that you're solidifying that relevance as behaviors change, driving desire and consideration, so that everything that you're doing through the rest of the funnel is actually more effective and more efficient because of that. And it means you can have that more healthy split between brand and acquisition activity. So how do you make it happen? You need the right analytics in place to expose these effects first of all. You also need to build the confidence in them across the team and those that are making the decisions. And you need to be ready to take those decisions that can seem intuitively risky, kind of moving spend away from something that is so close to the purchase, but into something higher up the funnel, but ultimately can really be backed by data, and not just within your brand, within the modeling that can take place, but within many, many case studies across the market.
Finally, obviously, as the customer base changes and as overall sales are shrinking, distribution is changing, whether it be in things like retail or even insurance, which I'm going to talk about in a second. It's critical to understand your customers, their reactivity to your marketing, which are the customers that are the highest value customers, which are the ones that have the potential or the propensity to be the highest value customers. And you need to know how to reach them so that you can, again, change your plan to be agile and find the groups that are going to convert. So one thing that we do here at Ekimetrics a lot becomes really important in this time, which is to cross our analytics of customer segmentation, customer analytics, understanding the distribution channels, understanding history, propensity, churn, in this case for insurance clients, churn likelihood, and demographics, and seeing how your customers differ, and combining that with the measurement of impact across all of your marketing channels. So we call it MMM cross CRM, but what it does is it takes our history, it segments your customer based on either how they're buying or how they're different points in the purchase funnel, whether it be engagement or conversion itself, and then you start to build models against those outcomes, so that you know that, for example, my TV or my search may work best with my lower value customers, or while CRM and certain types of CRM or certain campaigns may work best with my higher value customers. And so once you know that information, your optimization possibilities become even more important, right? In this case, which is what we do with a major insurance company, we're able to map not all of their customer segments, not just on the sense of profitability, but on their distribution channels, on their which parts of the business that they interact with the most, or where they might have the highest likelihood to convert, against all of the levers we have, and not just the CRM levers, not just the attribution levers that we have direct one-to-one response rates for, but TV, digital that you can't track, out of home, pricing, promotion, competition, all of the different aspects of that we generally include in a marketing mix model, but against those segments, right? And then you can start to, again, do that war gaming, which we're so fond of, is to say, listen, if these customers are going to be who is going to make up the core of what's going to be our base for the next 6 months, then this is the way we need to market. But there's a little bit of a trick here, which is that the crisis is obviously going to change our business model, right? So, in the history, maybe if we had done, and we can take this, you can still build the model today, to say maybe I have 3 segments plus some non-customers, and I know that some of them are, TV, really respond well to TV, they convert offline. Others are, maybe a smaller group or social media, heavy on social media and really only convert online. And there's a bigger group that's, probably, takes what most of us do is they may research certain pieces online, purchase offline, do some combination of the others. Once we know about those, the people who are converting on those, or the businesses who are converting on those channels and how they react to media, we might build a mix to sort of optimize our plan. But given what's happening with the environment, given the disruption in business, these dynamics are changing. The size of the segments are changing. So all of a sudden, now that those people who are converting offline is a much smaller group, and you can be dynamic with your customer database to say, okay, I know that some of these people are, maybe nobody's converting right now at all, or everybody's converting online, but enough about the customers to say some of them will continue to convert online or offline. More people are going to go towards that online model, being heavy on social media. We can see it in the media consumption. We can see it in and how people are buying, maybe in the short term on a day-to-day basis. But with the knowledge from the past, you still know what drives people who are in those buckets, and you can still optimize to this somewhat new group. And so your media mix, your marketing mix, your pricing, these things change, and you have to really be proactive about it, even though you're learning from the past, to know what is the, the person who is maybe used to buy Oreos in the store like me and now needs to find somebody to deliver them to his door. What's gonna be the best way to market to me? You don't need to market Oreos because my kids just want them anyway. I don't think they need it. But nonetheless, you can use the past to inform the future, despite the fact there are going to be really huge changes in customer segmentation and customer behaviors. So that's what we're doing for this insurance company, but also for some of our other clients.
So to kind of wrap that all together, now's a difficult time for a lot of businesses, but it's also a good time to be creative, to increase the consideration of the different opportunities that are available, to make sure that you know the scenarios that are out there, you have the lead indicators set up so that you can act quickly. You understand how to move locally before you think about doing everything at a national level, that you can make sure that those local opportunities are being captured, that you understand the funnel and true incrementality and where each of those marketing levers are acting, and then ultimately that you're tracking customer behaviors as they change and using the information that you have from the past and behaviors in the past that are still mapped and still relevant for current behaviors, because people are still shopping online. It's just a differing percentage. You know how you've kind of won and retained them in the past, and you can still do that now. So I appreciate, we're going to move on to some questions next, but I appreciate that we have a kind of mixed audience here. Some of you might want to go deeper into more specificities around really how do you bring it to life, how do you make it happen. If anyone kind of was expecting that, wanting that, and wants to kind of reach out, happy to have a conversation and talk through your specific circumstances and give you some kind of steer or talk through how we'd approach it at Eki as well.
Yeah, let me just add to that too, Matt. Thanks. One of the things that I think is important as we think through this is that, like you said at the beginning, we don't know what is going to happen, but what I do know is that there are enough analytic techniques that if your company is agile, can try. Sometimes the techniques are going to give you results that aren't going to come true, but if you're able to work with an analytics team that can try different scenarios and run different simulations, you're going to be in a better spot. And that's what sort of ties back to our philosophy at Ekimetrics, which is that there really is no one-size-fits-all solution. I think we all know that, since we don't know whether we're going to be able to go outside today or tomorrow or 3 weeks from now. So there's so much uncertainty, but there are ways to use different techniques to, prepare yourself better. And it's a bad time, but I do think it's sort of, an interesting time to be in our field, because there's the need for a lot of creativity. We're spending more time now solving those tougher problems as opposed to just chugging numbers, and that's I think pretty helpful for our partners and clients. So we'll open it up to questions.
Yeah, I've got a few questions. The first one is the following. In anticipation of customer behaviors moving more to e-commerce, how do retailers need to change in the way they operate and harmonize between brick and mortar and e-commerce strategies, given that oftentimes budgets, operations, and KPIs are siloed within their own business units and they don't talk to each other? What can help successfully facilitate that change?
I mean, we work with a retailer in Europe who, again, has historically always had a siloed e-com business from their brick and mortar business, and it's something we have raised as well for a long time. I guess first of all, it's not just a sense of how do you operate in a pure e-com versus brick and mortar business. We know more that the rise of BOPUS, or buy online, purchase offline, or buy online, pick up in store is rising as well, and is at different levels of maturity in different markets. So there's the operational play in terms of what you can actually operationally manage, and clearly during the crisis, just ensuring you can fulfill as many orders as possible when you have restrictions on packing, on warehousing operations, on deliveries, etc., is key, so that you're still giving the best customer experience, whatever channel it's in. But then how you make sure that you're breaking down those barriers and that you're working as an omnichannel team rather than an e-com and a brick and mortar team is really important. And from an analytics perspective, making sure that everyone in those teams is clear that how much is your online business driving visits and traffic to your brick and mortar stores, but also how a brick and mortar kind of browsing experience is converting into online purchases, because it goes both ways. Analytics can definitely support in that. It can show the overlap between those two teams and kind of give a data-driven approach to saying why they need to work closer together, because there is that on the channel experience now. It's not two separate channels. It is an expectation from your consumers that it is one experience, and it should follow through from store to online and online back into store.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I'd add that if you understand the previous dynamics of what we would call multi-stage or modeling, where you have that research online, that online engagement, and then that store offline conversion, if you're able to war game to that scenario that both maximizes your online conversions, so if you have e-com models, if you know what's driving, what channels work best for e-com, but you also know what channels work best for those conversion activities, you try to find that sort of happy medium. Again, it's about scenario planning. And so if you know what's driving not just conversion, but also consideration, the two of those together probably put you in the right place for what the new economy looks like. The other thing I would say is that, again, there's value in going granular. The more you know about individual product dynamics, if you're a retailer, some products are going to, we've seen this with our clients, obviously, some products are going to really be easier to purchase online, and others, they're dynamics that are going to change. I mean, I'm very excited to see what happens in the automotive market here in the US. I think that the online experience is going to be a very different one than it has been in the past. But if we can analyze what's driven in the past, we have at least a head start on how things are going to change in the future.
Oh, thanks. I have another question. Do you see commonality, or variability by industries?
I'll start, I guess. Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, we work here, obviously, across a number of different industries with different purchase dynamics, conversion dynamics, and path to purchase. But I think what we've talked about a little bit today is true across a variety of different industries when it comes to thinking about how the local dynamics are changing. Certainly that's true with anything that's really consumer focused, right? Anything that is either retail or automotive or even consumer banking and CPG, beauty. There's the dynamics of how research is done, how people are converting, and how they're responding to marketing. I think there's just a lot of similarities, especially based on who, I might sort of say price point or value proposition. So as we go towards, right now we're in a dynamic where people are more focused on essentials and things like that. But the definition of that changes, I think, depending on where we are in the recovery. So automotive and big purchases will probably go a little bit slower, but some of the dynamics there are going to are probably going to follow similar trajectories to, say, a beauty product. Matt?
Yeah, and I mean, to build what we're seeing more is kind of a split between some industries, a narrow range of industries that are actually strong opportunities during the crisis. So, subscription food services, etc., have like boomed in any market where it's been difficult to get access to food and leave. So it's an opportunity now in the short term, but the risk is how do you not lose that? And for them, it's how do you build operational capability now, but how do you not overinvest and leave yourself at a big risk if customer habits quickly change back to how it was before? And then you have those businesses that have been really badly hit through this crisis, where they're either not able to operate at all or operating at a very reduced capacity. There's obviously opportunity, and it has forced innovation in a lot of industries. So Adam raised automotive. We have a client in the automotive sector that has very quickly turned around a new model of selling through e-commerce in automotive, which they've been struggling to do for the last 5 years. And this crisis has really forced that innovation to happen, and it hasn't left any time. But then it's really about how can you accelerate back into the market. So the variability is really how there's almost like a mirror to the challenges and risks at each stage of this, but depending on whether you're doing well now or it's difficult for you now, and I think that's gonna be a really interesting kind of dynamic to follow and see if they're winning or not. Sorry, I think my son is trying to enter the room as well.
No worries. Thank you so much. Maybe a last question I've got. Here we go. The tools are business as usual, MM, CRM, etc. CRM, sorry. So what's so different in a crisis period?
Well, number one, you have to go and pick up your kid before maybe you actually make a decision on where to go. I think something just fell here too. Anyway, oh, there you go. Hey, how's it going? It's good. I think the key is that you have to know what you know, right? I mean, there is, as I was saying before, this is the opportunity to experiment in terms of crossing some of these techniques, but you have to be creative. So the way I put it is that we know, for example, the return on investment in the last 2 to 3 years of maybe, say, a beauty brand and their different marketing activities. We could run a simulation today to say, oh, media is going to do this and your pricing and promotion is going to do that. But we know that consumer behavior is changing. So we can either increase our measurement and incorporate some of that, customer analytics to understand how it's going to change, third-party information or whatnot to sort of build a new model, or you can sort of try to get a little bit of what's the best you can by being creative, making assumptions on media consumption changes based on what we're seeing in the last 3 to 4 weeks, people being on social, changing dynamics with search, and that sort of thing. Making assumptions around a range of coefficients or range of ROIs that you might find on those channels, or a range of promotions that vary by product. You have to use some art and then be honest in, the limitations. Again, even with a perfect model where we knew exactly what the response would be to every single media tactic 6 months from now, we still couldn't predict anything because we don't know what the base is going to look like. So we have to essentially use some assumptions, be honest about the assumptions, and adjust your models in a way that sort of combines that business sense with the analytics. I don't know if you want to add anything, Matt, but you might not have heard anything.
No, that's good. I missed a lot of questions.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. Just before we finish, I just would like to know that you will find under the handouts section a summary of our COVID offer if you're interested in that. And thank you. And thank you. Feel free to give us your feedback on that session in the satisfaction survey that should appear on your screen in a few seconds. And otherwise, have a lovely one. Take care and see you soon.
Stay safe, stay sane.
Yeah, thanks very much for joining
That
us.
was timed, Matt. I know you timed him coming in like that.
Yeah.
I know you. That was good. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.